Chapter 7. The Empty Trail. The inn's common room smelled of burnt oats and weak ale. Their breakfast was as rough as the mood that hung over the town. Bread baked hard as stone, porridge thinned with too much water, and a silence thick enough to make even Horian's booming voice feel smaller. Kaelen ate without complaint, chewing methodically. Horian grumbled between mouthfuls, muttering about how Cerulea's rest knew how to feed people properly. Izzi pushed her spoon through the gray slop without much appetite, her mind still circling the memory of green eyes, bandaged arms, and runes that seemed to pulse in her thoughts even now. When they stepped out into the chill morning air, the town was already tense. Villagers stood in knots, whispering, their faces pale in the light of dawn. Dogs barked, carts stood abandoned in the square, and every pair of eyes seemed fixed toward the mountains. Horian, never shy, stopped one of the townsfolk, a woman with tired eyes and a basket of wilted greens. "What's the word here, friend? What hunts your trail?" She glanced at him, then quickly at Kaelen's sword and Izzi's daggers, her mouth tight. "The beast," she whispered, "combs down the cliffs when the sun falls. Wings like storm clouds, claws that carry a man as easy as a rabbit. No one who's taken ever comes back." Her gaze darted to the mountains, then away as if afraid they were listening. Another villager nearby muttered, "It's the griffin. Has to be." Heads nodded around him, though none looked certain. Before Izzi could press for more, a woman's gasp cut the square short. Loud, sharp. It happened again! The three of them exchanged glances, no need for further talk, and set off at once. They ran through the cobbled streets, boots striking hard, following the rising commotion. Out through the northern gate, up the dirt track that wound into the dark teeth of the mountain trail. The chill bit sharper here, the scent of pine and stone strong in the air. When they rounded the bend, they saw it. 2 wagons sat in the middle of the trail. Both were intact, wheels unbroken, canvas covers still tied tight. One cart, however, had tipped onto its side, its goods spilled across the dirt, sacks of grain torn open, the contents soaking into the mud. The horses were gone, their traces snapped. No drivers, no guards, no merchants. Just silence, heavy and absolute. Nothing but him. The half-elf stood in the center of the wreckage, framed by the jagged cliffs above. His swords were sheathed across his back, but his posture was coiled, every line of him alive with readiness. His green eyes lifted as they approached, the bandaged arm flexing once at his side. "You're late," he said, voice calm, almost disappointed. Izzi's pulse quickened, her hand drifting unconsciously to the hilt of her dagger. Horian was the first to move, his heavy boots splashing through spilled grain as he strode toward the wagons. Kaelen followed at his side, eyes scanning the empty seats, the snapped traces where horses should have been tethered. "What happened here?" Horian barked, his voice carrying off the stone walls. He didn't answer. He was crouched near the overturned cart, fingertips brushing the dirt with practiced care, his green eyes sharp and calculating. He turned a grain husk over once in his hand, then let it fall, his gaze narrowing to the faint scuffs in the mud. Kaelen stepped closer, looming over him. He said, "What happened here?" The half-elf rose in one fluid motion, not even glancing at the greatsword hovering near his shoulder. His words came quiet, stoic. "Caravans deserted." Kaelen's jaw tightened. "I can see that," he snapped, voice rough. "You always this helpful?" Izzi's ears twitched at the bite in his tone. For once, she understood it. This man's cold detachment, his certainty, it gnawed the same way it had gnawed at her in the inn. Before Kaelen could press again, Horian called from the far side of the wagon. "Tracks! Here, look!" He was kneeling, thick fingers pressed into the prints scored into the mud, pulled upward, heavy drag marks. Whatever it was, it took them toward the mountain path. Izzi crossed quickly, her braids swinging over her shoulder as she crouched beside him. Faint grooves marred the dirt, wagon-sized ruts and smaller scuffs, the marks of boots or heels sliding against stone. A struggle? A panic? When she turned her head, he was already walking away, down the lower path that branched from the trail, long strides unhurried, his broad sword swaying across his back. He didn't spare them a glance. Izzi's chest tightened. "He's leaving us behind!" "Hey!" Izzi's voice cut across the trail. He stopped mid-stride. For a heartbeat he stood still, the weight of the mountains pressing around them before he turned. His green eyes found hers, cold, dull, and tired, as though every word spoken to him was another stone added to his burden. "It's serious," he said. Izzi's breath caught, but she forced herself forward, her boots crunching against the dirt. This time, she swallowed her pride, letting the bite in her voice soften. "Serious? What are you thinking?" His brows lifted faintly, surprise flickering across his face before the mask returned. He crossed his arms over his chest, the bandaged one tightening with the motion. "Fine, elf, this is all you get." His voice carried like stone cracking against stone. "Look at the scene, tell me what you see." Izzi glanced back at the overturned wagon, at the snapped traces, the grain scattered across the dirt. She started, but her words faltered. Sirius's mouth twitched in something between disdain and weariness. "Exactly." Her ears burned, her lip curling faintly as she turned back toward him. But before she could press, his voice snapped sharp across the trail. "Go kill your bird!" The words hung heavy, louder than the echo they made against the cliffs. And then he started striding down the lower path, leaving Izzi with her question burning and no answer but his dismissal. Izzi stood rooted where Sirius had left her, his words still ringing in her ears. "Go kill your bird." Her gaze drifted back toward the wagons. She forced herself to walk slowly, eyes raking over the scene with deliberate care. The caravan wasn't shattered, not really. The wagons were still whole, the crates still lashed, only one cart tipped onto its side. No blood on the ground, no shredded cloth, no torn shoes scattered in panic. A griffin attack, if it truly had been one, should have left chaos in its wake. Broken wood, ripped harness, deep furrows from claws, the wreckage of a struggle. Instead, the place felt abandoned, hollow, as though the people had simply stepped away. She crouched near the snapped traces, fingers brushing the leather where the horses had been torn free. Too clean, too quiet. Kaelen's voice carried behind her, steady and low. Horian went on ahead, trail climbs sharp. He wanted to see if the tracks carried higher. Izzi straightened, brushing dirt from her palms, her lips pressed thin. "Kael, doesn't it bother you? There's no mess here, no fight, no blood, just gone." Kaelen studied the wagons, his scarred face unreadable. After a long pause, he nodded once. "Strange. Strange," Izzi echoed, her voice tight. Her violet-gray eyes flicked back toward the path Sirius had taken. The silver cuff in his ear flashed again in her memory, unbidden. Kaelen shifted his greatsword on his back. "Still, the bird's the best lead we've got." She sighed, reluctantly agreeing. "Then we stay on course." Together, they turned toward the mountain trail, the wagons silent behind them, as if holding on to secrets neither of them yet knew how to read. Izzi and Kaelen moved quickly, following the trail upward until Horian's broad frame came back into view. He crouched on a rocky outcrop, his cloak pressed tight against the wind, one hand raised in silent greeting. "Trail runs higher," he murmured when they reached him, his voice quieter than they were used to. His usual booming energy seemed tempered by the weight of the mountains. Whatever took those folk, it carried them this way. From there, the climb grew steeper. They moved single file along a path carved more by claws and hooves than men, hugging the cliff face when the rock fell away into shadowed ravines. Izzi led the way at times, quick and careful, her sharp eyes sweeping for broken feathers, scraps of cloth, or claw marks etched into stone. Kaelen's bulk brought up the rear, his greatsword balanced easily against his back, though every now and then he'd press a hand to the rock to steady Izzi when the trail narrowed too thin. Caves and crevices gaped along the mountainside, yawning dark and hollow. They checked each one they dared, moving quiet, blades at the ready. Once, Izzi drew a dagger and pointed to faint scratch marks along the inside of a cave mouth. Too shallow for a griffin's claws, but sharp enough to set her ears twitching. "Not our quarry," Kaelen muttered, pulling her back. "Bear den. We'd best leave it sleeping." So they did, slipping away as the sound of a low growl rumbled faint from within. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became, sharp and cold in their lungs. Their boots crunched on loose scree, stones tumbling down into the black valleys below. Once, a mountain cat padded into their path, its fur bristling silver in the moonlight. It stared at them, tail lashing, before Kaelen stepped forward, his presence alone enough to send it vanishing back into the shadows. Hours seemed to pass beneath the sweep of the stars, the trail endless, until finally the path widened and the wind grew sharper, cutting across their faces with a sting. The jagged ridge opened into a plateau, and there, resting in the crook of the peak, they found it. A nest. The thing was enormous, easily spanning 20 paces across. Branches thicker than Izzi's legs had been hauled here, tangled with bones bleached white by sun and wind. Shards of horn, the rusted heads of weapons, and scraps of torn leather were woven into its structure like trophies. Feathers, long, silvered, edged in black, drifted across the ground, some as wide as her arm. The air smelled faintly of musk and iron. Izzi froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Gods," she whispered. Horian's grin was gone. Even he seemed struck silent by the sight of it. Kaelen drew a slow breath, his hand on the hilt of his greatsword. So the tales were true. They moved in silence, every footfall measured. The wind whistled thin across the peak, carrying the smell sharper now, copper, rot, and musk thick in the air. Izzi's stomach turned before she even saw it. At the edge of the nest, they crouched low, peering between branches thicker than a man's arm. What they found froze them. A griffin's body sprawled across the heart of the nest. Once majestic, its wings now lay in tatters, feathers dulled, matted with dried blood. The ribcage had been split wide, bones snapped like kindling. Its beak, once curved like a blade, was shattered, hanging at an unnatural angle. The stink of old blood clawed at their throats, sour and heavy. Izzi lifted a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. Saints above! But movement caught her eye. Nestled in the corpse, pressed against the griffin's torn flank, a smaller body stirred. A fledgling, its feathers soft, not yet hardened, its talons small. It nuzzled blindly into its mother's ruin, then stilled again, breathing slow, asleep in the only warmth left to it. The three of them exchanged looks, none daring to breathe too loud. Kaelen's hand tightened on his sword hilt, but he didn't draw it. He simply gave a small shake of his head, urging retreat. Step by step, they eased back from the rim of the nest, until the stench thinned enough to breathe without gagging. Horian bent low near the rocks, his face stripped of its usual grin, voice a whisper. "That's no predator, not anymore." Izzi's violet-gray eyes flicked over the nest again. No bones, no human remains. Only the griffin's own carcass, its young, and the smaller skeletons of mountain prey, hares, goats, foxes, woven into the structure. Her ears twitched, her scarred lip tightening. No merchants, no guards, no villagers, just a slaughtered beast in its own nest. Kaelen frowned, his scarred hands flexing. "Then what's taking the people?" The wind rose, hissing through the rocks, carrying the stench of death with it. Izzi shivered, not from the cold, but from the certainty that the mountain held darker secrets than a griffin's shadow. They lingered at the edge of the nest, the wind carrying the stench of death down the slope. The fledgling stirred once more, letting out a soft, plaintive cry, and curled back into its mother's ruined chest. Kaelen's jaw tightened. "It'll grow, and when it does..." He didn't need to finish. Izzi's throat tightened, her ears pulling back. "Saints, it's just a bird. It's a predator," Kaelen said evenly. "It won't know how not to be." Silence pressed between them until Horian exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. "Best done quick. Better than letting the thing starve slow or tear some shepherd apart a year from now." Kaelen nodded once. He moved with quiet finality, drawing his blade but softening the swing. A single strike, clean, merciful. The sound was over in an instant. Izzi looked away, her chest hollow, her nails digging into her palms. Kaelen wrapped the small body in a sack, knotting it closed. "We'll take it back. Tell the chief the truth, make our dinner, and let the dead lie where they belong." His voice was low, steadier than the shadow in his eyes. The three turned from the nest, beginning the long descent. The climb down was easier on their lungs, but heavier on their thoughts. By the time the lower trees came back into sight, the air was thick with pine and the sound of trickling streams. The village roofs were faint specks below, lanterns beginning to glow against the twilight. The three paused on a rocky shelf, catching their breath, the sack with the fledgling's body heavy in Kaelen's hand. Izzi crouched low, eyes scanning the valley. If the griffin's dead, then it wasn't the one taking people. No bodies, no signs of a struggle at the nest, just an animal killed in its home. Kaelen frowned, his scarred hand tightening on the sack. "Then what did it? Not the griffin," Izzi said firmly. Her voice carried more conviction than comfort. "Something else. Something clever." Sirius knew it. Horian stood with his arms folded, jaw tight, for once without his usual grin. "Aye. Bastard's keeping something from us. If he's still on that trail, then we follow him. Get our answers the hard way if we must." They all nodded. Tomorrow, they'd track Sirius. For now, they needed to return to the village, deliver their truth, and find their footing. Izzi drew a slow breath, letting the mountain wind whip across her ears. "We'll tell the chief, then we find Sirius." But before Kaelen could answer, the undergrowth ahead exploded with a roar. A bear, massive and scar-ridged, burst from the trees, its eyes wild with hunger. It barreled toward them in a mad dash, claws tearing up stone, jaws open in a froth of rage. Izzi's hands barely touched her daggers before the beast slammed its head into her ribs. The world tilted, air rushing past her ears, sky, stone, nothing but the void as she toppled backward over the cliff's edge. "Izzi!" Kaelen's voice thundered, raw and ragged. Horian's cry echoed it, booming against the stone. The bear wheeled, bloodlust burning in its eyes, and lunged for them both. The bear wheeled on them with a roar, foam slathering its jaws. Kaelen's greatsword came free in a flash, meeting claw and teeth in a storm of steel and blood. Horian barreled forward with a shout, drawing the beast's attention long enough for Kaelen to swing wide. The fight was brutal. Claws raked Kaelen's left arm, carving deep into muscle. Blood poured hot down his wrist, but he didn't falter, every strike of his sword driven by Izzi's scream in his ears. Horian feinted left, throwing his weight behind a heavy blow that drove the bear sideways. Kaelen seized the opening, twisting, and with a ragged shout he split the beast's throat. It collapsed in a spray of crimson, its final growl shuddering into silence. Kaelen dropped to one knee, clutching his torn arm, breath ragged. A new scar carved its place there, one that would never fade. Horian stood over the carcass, chest heaving, untouched but grim. His eyes turned immediately toward the cliff's edge. "Go," he said. "I'll see to this." Kaelen didn't hesitate. Blood dripping from his arm, he sprinted down the narrow path that wound beneath the ridge, calling her name into the dark ravine below. "Izzi!" The mountain swallowed his voice, the silence after it heavier than the strike of any blade. Darkness held her first, heavy, suffocating, then pain, a deep, jagged ache that ran through her ribs and chest, every breath sharp as knives. Izzi's eyes fluttered open, her vision swam, shapes bending in the gloom until the flicker of flame steadied them. The crackle of fire filled the alcove, its smoke mingling with the damp breath of rain outside. Thunder rolled across the mountains, shaking the stone above. "You're alive?" The voice was low, edged with surprise, but unmistakable. She blinked hard, forcing her eyes to focus. Across the fire, Sirius crouched, turning a branch until it spat sparks. His green eyes glowed faint in the firelight, sharp as glass. Pain lanced her side when she tried to shift, dragging a hiss from between her teeth. "You must be stubborn," Sirius said without looking up. "Most wouldn't have survived a fall like that." Izzi let out a strained laugh, her voice dry. "Stubborn's one word for it." The alcove came into focus around her, an elevated cleft of stone, half-sheltered from the storm outside. Rain sheeted down just beyond, wind howling through the cracks, but here the fire kept the chill at bay. She tried to sit, and the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Her top half was bare save for bandages wound tight from collarbone to waist, fresh linen stained faintly pink. Izzi yanked the blanket back to her chest, glaring across the fire. Sirius didn't flinch. "Don't worry, I only patched you up. Your clothes are behind you, bloodied but intact." She swallowed, her head still reeling, but forced herself upright despite the flare of pain. "You did this? Patched me up? Didn't think you the type." At that, his eyes finally lifted to hers. For a moment, he just studied her, expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, tossing another branch into the fire. "Truthfully, I thought about leaving you." Her lip curled into a smirk despite the ache. "Why didn't you?" Sirius's gaze lingered on her, steady and unreadable. The fire popped between them. He paused longer than she expected, and when he finally spoke, it was quiet. "Don't know." The storm outside roared louder, thunder drowning the silence that followed. The fire spat sparks, shadows flickering over the alcove walls. Izzi sat propped against the stone, blanket clutched loosely around her chest, her breaths shallow and sharp with every movement. Across from her, Sirius worked in silence, feeding the flames, eyes dulled with exhaustion. "Find your bird?" he asked suddenly, voice cutting through the crackle. Izzi arched a brow, feigning calm though her ribs screamed with each breath. "Maybe." His gaze flicked toward her. "Disappointed?" She let out a slow exhale that almost passed for a laugh. "Should I be? Would have ruined your fun if we had." That drew the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, though it wasn't a smile. He studied her, firelight carving harsh lines across his tired face. Izzi held his gaze, violet-gray eyes narrowing. There was something heavy in him, something that bent his shoulders in ways no wound could. It reminded her of herself, of nights alone on cold roads carrying scars too deep to show. The blanket slipped as she shifted, sliding down to her stomach. Pale firelight caught the white bandages wrapped across her chest. She didn't pull it up this time, just let the moment linger as she tilted her head. "Those earrings?" she said softly. She turned, brushing her hair back to show her own silver cuff, the same design catching the glow. "Yours?" "They're the same." Sirius's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing, then at last his voice came low. "A gift. From someone long ago." He paused, eyes flickering to the fire. "From Valoran." The name struck like a blade in her gut, her ears twitched, her breath caught. Valoran. Her home. The place she had been banished from, the city she'd buried in memory but never truly escaped. Izzi swallowed hard, her hand brushing unconsciously against her scarred lip. "Valoran," she echoed, her voice barely more than a whisper. For once, Sirius didn't look at her. He stared into the fire as if it might consume the weight of what he'd said. The fire snapped, casting gold across the stone, shadows flickering over Sirius's face. Izzi's fingers toyed absently with the edge of the blanket at her waist, her chest rising and falling shallow with the ache in her ribs. "Are you from there?" she asked finally, her voice low, fragile as smoke. "Valoran? Or your family?" At that, Sirius grew still, the pause stretched long, the fire hissing in the silence. When he turned his gaze to her, it was sharp, knowing, like he could read every unspoken thought behind her eyes. "My mother was," he said at last. His voice carried the weight of stone. "A story for another time." He shifted back, resting against the alcove wall, his broad swords laid across his lap. His green eyes didn't leave her, steady and unreadable, watching every twitch of her ears, every shallow breath. Izzi pressed herself deeper into the rock, the blanket slipping slightly lower again. Pain raked her chest, each inhale hot, uneven. She stared back at him, violet-gray eyes roving over his tired face, his bandaged arm, the runes coiling faintly on his skin. "You should rest," Sirius said quietly, though there was no softness in it, just command, steady and cold. Their eyes locked, the firelight between them burning hotter than the storm outside. Izzi's lips parted, breath ragged. "I know you." The words broke apart as her strength failed her, her head lolled to the side, body yielding to exhaustion. Sirius stood slowly, pulling the blanket back up over her shoulders. For a long moment he hovered there, his hand lingering before he drew back. He lowered himself once more against the wall, the firelight casting his profile in stark shadow. His gaze lingered on the sleeping elf, her face pale against the bandages. For the first time his expression shifted, sorrow pooling deep in his eyes, sorrow for something he would not name. The storm raged on, thunder rolling across the mountain, but within the alcove only the fire and his silence remained.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.